Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ISC2 New Jersey Chapter podcast, Unencrypted Chatter, Jersey Girls in Cyber. This series is dedicated to uplifting the voices of women in cybersecurity, highlighting their incredible achievements, and sharing their wisdom with those aspiring to join the field. My name is Aaron Kraus. I am a security compliance practice architect at Latticora, as well as an author of CISSP and CCSP reference books. I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Aneta and Reggie.
Hello, my name is Aneta Klepacka and I am a cybersecurity professional passionate about vulnerability and patch management and GRC.
And hello, everyone. My name is Reginald Alford. I have almost 2 decades of IT experience, mainly consisting of auditing, help desk, desktop support, and third-party risk management. I joined ISC2 New Jersey's chapter this year, and with the help of the chapter study group and self-paced study, I sat for and passed my CISP.
Awesome achievement. Most importantly today, we are thrilled to be joined by an amazing guest, Sophia Kokolis. Sophia is the Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO, at Freedom Mortgage Corporation. Her responsibilities include security strategy, policies, controls, vendor security, security operations, and cyber threat detection and response. I had to take a breath in the middle of that, so Sophia, I can only imagine how much work actually goes into your daily job. With over 20 years of experience in mortgage lending, credit cards, and global banking, Sophia is skilled at embedding effective risk management and governance programs to achieve business objectives. She holds CISSP and is also a certified Six Sigma Black Belt. Outside of work, Sophia can be found tending to her family as well as her small farm. Sophia, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here with all of you today. Thank you.
So I know we're here to talk about cyber, but I'm going to take a hard right turn because I can't let this final thing in your bio go. I want to know more about the farm. What led you there? What does the farm actually entail? What does that look like on a daily basis?
Right, of course. So we have a small hobby farm in New Jersey, in southern New Jersey, and we purchased it during COVID, actually. And we have barn stalls for horses. We don't have any horses yet. But that might be a future for us, boarding horses. But for right now, we have about 20 chickens, 4 goats. We have 2 rabbits, 5 dogs, and 2 cats. We have 2 turkeys as well. Sorry, missed the turkeys. But it's been a great adventure for us as a family. I have 2 sons and a husband, and we, like I said, got the farm during COVID and started acquiring our pets for the farm and our egg layers, our chickens. And it's been a great adventure, just learning about all the different animals and how to care for them and how to make sure that they have the right environment, to thrive in. And so it's been really fun. We have fresh eggs every day. So really, really fun times.
Sounds like a lot of hard work, but some interesting payoff for it as well. I wonder, from tending the farm, we obviously in security, we need folks from all walks of life. Phishing attacks don't really require technical skills so much as psychology or sociology skills. I wonder, I've never encountered anybody with a farming background, but are there any skills or any lessons learned from the farm that you've transferred to your day job at Freedom Mortgage?
If I had to say, one of the things that I focused on when I brought different animals into the farm was learning everything I could about that animal and how to care for it. During COVID, a lot of the animal hospitals and veterinary clinics were closed, and I learned how to administer their vaccines and where to get their feed and how to take care of their environment and make sure that they had everything they needed to be warm and safe and cared for, and so that they could thrive and have really good lives and produce the eggs that we wanted to enjoy on the farm as well. And so I think that really aligns itself to the business environment too. In order to have successful programs and projects, you really need to create an environment where people can thrive, where where your systems can function well. And, looking at that from a macro level is really important. It's not just the distinct deliverable that you're trying to reach or goal that you're trying to reach. It really looking at the whole environment. Have I set this team up for success? Do they have the right skills? Do they have the right information in order to do their job? So that's basically the biggest thing that I've taken from the farm and been able to apply to my professional life.
Awesome.
Great. Sophia, what inspired you to pursue a career in cybersecurity?
Interesting. So for me, I follow the threats. So early in my career, just after the financial collapse, I dove into operational risk, information risk management, because those were what my companies needed me to focus on in order to adapt to the threat environment that existed from a regulatory perspective. The entire regulatory landscape changed after the financial crisis. So I needed to learn new things. I needed to figure out how to apply these new risk frameworks and requirements across our different processes. And now I've switched to cybersecurity because that's the latest threat environment. So I'm kind of, I would say, a threat hunter, looking for those areas that I can really have the most benefit and impact on in an organization. And right now that's cybersecurity. So that's how I transitioned from information risk management to cybersecurity, and that became my next area of interest and passion. And all with the same undercurrent of risk management, preventing bad things before they happen, whether that be from an operations perspective, business continuity, data loss, or right now, of course, fighting cyber threats.
Great, sounds like me.
Yeah.
Definitely feels like one of those things that you can't know what you're getting into. It's always changing. If you don't know what you want to be when you grow up, cybersecurity is a great field to be in.
Exactly.
Sure.
Bringing it to our topic, are there any specific challenges or anything that you faced as a woman entering the field of cybersecurity? Any experiences that shaped where you've gotten to today?
Yeah. So I think in terms of experiences that have shaped, when I first got into IT, I was probably in most instances, I was the only woman in the room. And that I had to learn to, be confident and really not allow myself to be overcome by that kind of environment of being the only female in the room. And part of that is really going into those meetings and doing all the prep work, probably twice as much as my peers did, to be prepared for the next discussion, so that I felt like I had the knowledge to contribute to that meeting and be able to anything that I brought up, that I had the solid foundation around my any topic that I wanted to address, that I knew my stuff basically. And so over preparing got me over that hoop of being maybe the only female in the room.
Yeah, definitely a challenge. Reggie, I think you had the next question here.
And you kind of touched on this, Sophia, when you were explaining some of the takeaways from the farm, and in the last question of being the only woman in the room in many instances. But more specifically, what soft skills do you think you leverage most often in your role as a CISO?
Definitely communication skills. So being able to take something, a lot of people like to use big words and use a lot of industry terms. And for me, it's exactly the opposite. I like to speak in terms that the person that I'm communicating with can understand very easily, because that's the only way that I can get the message across and give them something actionable that they can take back to their teams. If I'm going over their heads terminology wise, or speaking to them in something that's overwhelming, we'll never get to that end goal of working together and delivering on a particular objective. So part of my role is being that translator and
Hmm.
not really focusing on how's the easiest way, and using examples many times for people to understand that are tactical examples in our everyday lives that people can connect to in order to communicate effectively. So that's the biggest thing, is really tailoring. Over the years in my career, a lot of times in the beginning, I would start off with as much information as I could, right? I'm thinking about emails. Sometimes you get emails and they're so chock full of great information. But when you really need to think about your audience and understand what they need in order to be able to help you, make sure that there's a call to action, make sure basic communication skills that you need in order to achieve your goal, and realizing that the higher you get, the more executives that you're talking to, less is more, and you need to be able to condense the information that you have into putting yourself in their seat and saying, okay, what they don't have all the knowledge that I have on this topic, and I can't assume that they do, but what do they need in order to make the decision or take the action that I'm asking them to do? And think about it as if you're telling your 100-year-old aunt something in very basic and simplistic terms to say, here's the issue, here's what we're recommending, and here's the ask from you, and really being, I'm going to say, blunt about it and being very direct about, in a polite way, of course, about what you're asking that person to do, or to, change a process, or whatever you're asking them to collaborate with you on. You need to be very specific. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned across my career is that skill of being able to condense information to the audience that I'm trying to work with.
It makes sense. I often tell people I won't take it as someone talking to me condescendingly, but I always use the phrase "talk to me like I'm three,"
Yeah,
and that goes a long way.
absolutely.
I think it's also interesting, something you mentioned, Sophia. It's like the longer the title, the longer someone's title is, the shorter their attention span. So as soon as you start throwing chief in there, yeah, you have maybe 30 seconds of attention before they move on to another topic.
Yeah, because they have a lot on their plate. So
Hmm.
it's not, they need to be able to, you need to give them what they need to focus on right up front, 3 sentences, short messaging and very direct. And that's the most appreciated at a decision maker level. That's what they need in order to be able to react. And if they have more questions, they'll ask, right? They're not shy executives. They'll ask you if they have more questions. So
That actually leads to a question that I just thought of. What is one of the most challenging questions you've ever had to face? Maybe something
that's an
like
interesting question.
why was there a risk that we didn't know about, or yeah, what could we have done to avoid this? And there's no easy answer.
So one of the questions that's always a challenge is how can we prepare for the human element, especially when we talk about business email compromise um, and those kinds of phishing attacks where the human is the variable that you can't control in that equation when people want to click on things. Things are, they're used to working quickly and reading emails quickly. So that's one of the hardest things that we have to deal with. And I don't have a great answer for that, unfortunately. It's one of those things where we have to train people and continue to reinforce that. But that's the element that's very difficult to control.
Sophia, what are some key lessons you learned about building and leading effective cybersecurity programs, which you actually did for your organization?
I think it's really trying to understand what need I'm trying to fill, being very clear on that. So asking a lot of questions before you go decisioning or looking for a tool. You need to understand what problem you're trying to solve for. And from there, if you're trying to, I'll give you an example. Our CEO said, I want a vendor security team within the security group, separate from vendor management, really just focused on vendor security. And our CEO is super bright. He's just ahead of his time in terms of being able to see ahead, what are the threats that are coming. And one of the biggest threats that he had identified is that third-party risk. And your systems and processes could be rock solid, but your third parties also have to have rock solid processes, and their third parties have to have rock solid processes, because we're living in such an interdependent world, interconnected world, that one domino fails. It might be that all of the attorney offices that you're using, you might have different attorney offices that you're using around the globe, but it might be that they all use the same fourth party, and that fourth party failure happens, and now all of your law offices are having trouble continuing operations. So that's an extreme example. But we did see something recently with CrowdStrike. So many companies were all impacted by the same supplier, right? Outage, and it affected globally so many companies. And so that was the ask and the business need that we had to solve for, which is really an operational and a business continuity disaster recovery type of need from the spin of our third parties, and how do we oversee their cyber hygiene? How do we make sure that they're all living up to the same level of expectations that we're living up to meet our regulator and investor requirements? And part of that was building out, seeing when I was given that task, I said, okay, we have a lot of vendors. We need to be able to scale up and scale down. And so I knew I needed a core team of maybe 4 people, and that's the size of the team that we built out internally. But we also we did a hybrid approach. So we have a core team of in-house, technically and trained people in third-party risk management, but also partnered with a vendor that could help us scale up and scale down and quickly get an assessment across all of our key vendors, and also have tooling built in for cyber hygiene monitoring 24/7 on those vendors. So that way we kind of balance both needs, the ability to scale up and scale down, as well as having that in-house expertise that would get us that oversight of the program and help us maintain control over it. So, you really have to listen to your stakeholders. What need are they looking to solve for, and how can you do it most efficiently and effectively, and be able to scale and evolve over time without incurring a lot of additional cost.
Perfect. Thank you.
It's a really fascinating idea, and Sophia, you mentioned it might seem preposterous that everyone's using the same supplier, but especially in the world of SaaS applications, everyone's running on probably one of the 3 major cloud service providers. If one of them suffers an outage, even if you have different software suites in use at different law offices, if they're all ultimately hosted on the same cloud provider that suffers an outage, even though it looks like there's diversity of suppliers, in fact, there is still a single point of failure. So sounds preposterous, but I mean, look, AWS suffers an outage. Suddenly people's vacuum cleaners stop working. Whoever worked those pieces together?
Your refrigerator.
All of your smart TVs, your washer, everything needs a cloud connection. Right. You mentioned that your CEO is kind of looking to the future and seeing what's coming up. I wonder, from your perspective as the CISO, what are some of the things that you see on the horizon for cybersecurity? What are the challenges, both in leadership or possibly as well in the implementation of cybersecurity programs that you see coming up, and what are you thinking about to tackle those?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, the next thing, I see the melding of cyber, privacy, and governance. And so as we move forward, and cyber and privacy are talked about, cybersecurity and privacy are talked about in the same sentences now. You can see in from a regulatory perspective, from an investor perspective, those are used very close together when they're asking us questions about our program. The newest thing is AI governance. And with AI being embedded in all of our tool sets today, it's the way forward. That's one thing that I'm upskilling myself on, members of my team on, is how do we govern AI and make sure that any systems and tools that are introduced are secure, of course, in our environment, that our data is protected and not being used to train the model. But further than that, how do we make sure that any decisions that are being rendered are not subject to any kind of scrutiny, and that will be valid, viable, decisions from either from a business or an operational perspective. So that's one thing that's very, pervasive across all the providers. Now everyone's putting AI into all of their tooling. And that's one thing that we really have to make sure that we're really making conscious decisions as we move into this space, that we understand the risks, we understand the benefits, and that those open discussions are happening, and that the right guardrails are put up to govern the AI.
That's really fascinating, and I think it's one of the other areas that makes cybersecurity both interesting and challenging. It's not just security as the CISO. You basically are across the entire business. You have responsibility in pretty much every area. AI is a great example in my work as a consultant. We're helping a lot of folks build their AI management systems, so following like the ISO or the NIST standards, very similar to the ISMS you would get from ISO 27001. And one of the key areas that we keep getting asked about and don't yet have a good answer is, well, what about if the AI is wrong? Technically, that's not a security thing, but it is part of your AI management system that I'm consulting on. And this actually impacted me. I had a moment of panic. Apple's intelligence summarized an email from a local agency that was a missing person report, but it pulled my name as the addressee for the message. So the AI generated summary made it look like I was much younger than I actually am, and I was also been reported missing to the police. But clearly, those data elements were in the message, but they were not the intended message that email was supposed to contain. So AI is not always going to give us 100% correct answers.
That's right. We have to have mechanisms to test and validate and see when it's veering off, off the rails and can cause issues.
And suddenly that's our responsibility as security professionals.
That's right. That's right.
Speaking of our security stuff, Reggie, I think, cyber hygiene was up for a question about that was up for you.
Yeah, and you kind of spoke to it to an extent when you were talking about the program building at your organization and how cyber psychology, as Aaron said, and the end users play such a big role in everything. I call them the human firewall because we can't
That's
account
right.
for all of our different psychologies, our likes and our dislikes, and at the end of the day, we're all just trying to be as productive as we possibly can. And in light of that, um, what are your tips for promoting good cyber hygiene throughout an organization?
There's so many. I mean, part of it is communicating with people and training them, not just how to be secure in their workplace, but also at home. So that's one of the things that
Hmm.
we try to train people because those good habits will cross over. So making sure that their passwords are, secure and they're not using the same password across multiple sites, and explaining to them the dangers of that and how you could easily wind up in a very bad situation of having identity theft if that happens. Um, Recommending that they take steps to lock their credit report or check their credit report frequently to make sure that there's no unauthorized activity. Those kinds of personal habits and not fall for phishing emails or texts, smishing,
Hmm.
those kinds of things in their personal life, because then those same habits will cross over into the work environment. So a lot of it is training them how to be cyber aware
Hmm.
in all facets of their lives, but also communicating what are the rules of the road when they're operating our equipment and working within our environment, and really putting in technology blocks and controls to prevent certain things, bad things from happening. So as much as possible, we're going to put in those system controls, not allow people to send sensitive data externally. Um, you know, Putting in um, other detective controls that are preventing people, or preventive controls preventing them from falling into certain traps, giving them information about how to look for certain emails that are coming through that are sensitive, and training them to report them so that we can, scrub them from all of the user base. So a lot of it is training, but it's also using any kind of systematic controls that are at our disposal to prevent those bad things from happening. It's kind of both things have to happen at the same time.
Gotcha. My follow-up question was tips for communicating information to non-technical end users, but you went over that when we uh we asked you about your soft skills that you use, and you did an excellent job of explaining how breaking things down into layman's terms is the best way of going about doing things when speaking to the non-technical, and most specifically when speaking to the non-technical stakeholders. You said TLDR, pardon me, too long, didn't read, so you want to kind of keep it short and
Sorry.
sweet and concise and transparent, bite sized, so they can take that information, chew on it, and do with it what they will. Um, I had a follow up question, but just as quick as it entered my mind, it slipped my mind. So if I remember it, I'll bring it up. But that's all I have.
As I say, I have a bit of a follow-up question, Reggie, if you don't mind me jumping in on good
course.
cyber hygiene. Sophia, I was thinking about what you said about having good personal habits. And I know a lot of the work that I did right at the beginning of COVID was basically scrambling to help companies write VPN policies because they suddenly had remote workers, but then also figuring out what their physical security policies needed to look like with a suddenly remote workforce who is taking corporate equipment outside of the office. I actually in my past have done third-party risk management audits for a bank, and we were one of the only groups of folks who were allowed to take laptops out of the bank's physical premises. Obviously, we had to. We were on site at vendors doing those audits, but the list of controls that were in place, the sensitivity of the work that we did was very high. It was quite burdensome. Before we traveled internationally, we had to have our laptops imaged. When we got back, they were wiped and restored to the image that was taken before, just in case we had fallen victim to a nefarious Wi-Fi network when traveling. And I think nowadays those kinds of burdensome controls just wouldn't fly. People almost expect to be able to work from home. So the line between personal and corporate cybersecurity seems to be getting blurred by the day.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Reggie, any chance you remembered your question?
Yes, I did. Um, Awesome that you guys have like a vendor security arm at where you are. And in my exposure to third party risk management, I've seen over the last couple of years assessments go from simple yes or no questions in an Excel spreadsheet to full on web applications that have sub questions depending on how you answer the root question. And things going from being 20 questionnaires assessments to full blown 200, 250 question assessments that also require producing evidence, and it's more involved than it has been prior to. And third party risk management is one thing, but then you explain that one scenario where your providers are all using the same provider. So do you think there will be a more inclusion or more looking into fourth party risk
Yeah.
management?
Yes, I do see that in the future, at least going out to fourth parties, because it's what we saw with CrowdStrike,
Hmm.
right, where all of these other companies were there was concentration risk, right, and knowing how many of your suppliers would be impacted if one company went down.
Hmm.
Um, that's very important information, and you need to build that into your disaster recovery plans and figure out other alternate mechanisms to be able to get back up and running, and even support your vendors to get to that next place too.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, very cool. We're coming up on time here. We're going to close out with a couple of questions, kind of tying us back to the theme of women in cyber. One question that we ask all of our guests is, what steps do you think the cybersecurity industry could or should take to become more inclusive for women? What calls to action might you issue to your fellow cybersecurity practitioners?
I'm going to give them a very specific thing, and that's stop having a requirement for a cybersecurity or an IT degree for your cybersecurity professionals. Many of us come from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, and that's part of the diversity that adds a lot of value for us to have a lot of different experiences all coming together to fight these threats. And so, my background, I was a French major and German and Italian minor, nothing related to IT or cybersecurity. But throughout my career, I've attended trainings, I achieved my CISSP. So as long as someone is adaptable and is able to learn a lot of new technology and process and disciplines, then that's all that matters. And I think that's one thing that I would love to see removed as a requirement and being a lot more inclusive to other backgrounds in cybersecurity. And I think that would bring a lot more, because we know the statistics around women in STEM majors, and that's not a path that a lot of women start off in. And they could have 10 or 15 years of experience, and that's one thing that would exclude them from certain jobs. And so I think that would be a big way to add inclusivity for a lot of women.
So, what advice you will give to young women aspiring to become leaders in cybersecurity?
It's a great question. I think that one of the things that you should be very open to is change. That's one thing that's going to carry you through, and not just open to change, but excited by change. So even if your personality is not that, right? If you tend to be more resistant to change, that's one thing that I advise you to conquer very early in your career, because in the world that we live in, things are changing all the time. And your ability to adapt to that change and your ability to learn new things are going to be what set you apart and really make you successful in this field, because there's nothing that's staying the same. Nothing. So that's one thing, is being a learner is going to be the biggest thing that you can do for your life, is adapting that change mindset where you're always looking for improvement, always looking for change.
Thank you
Sure.
for that. So today we cover some great insights on cybersecurity, touching on critical skills and knowledge to pursue a career in cybersecurity, the challenges cybersecurity leaders are facing, and gave an advice how to build an effective cybersecurity program. We also talked about the industry, how the industry can be more inclusive for women. And special thanks to Sophia for joining us today and sharing such valuable insights. Thanks again for listening, and as always, keep chasing your passion. Okay, more to come from Unencrypted Chatter podcast from ISC2 New Jersey chapter. Thank you so much. And again,
Vielen Dank, Sophia.
thank you so much.
Thank you.